All right, in this lesson, we're going to look at how we can write systems of equations. We're going to look at when we're given graphs, tables, and word problems. So the graphs and the tables especially aren't new. We're taking skills that we used writing one equation, and we're just doing it twice, all right? So with a graph, remember it is easy to find your slope and your y-intercept, okay? That's what we're looking for here, slope and y-intercept for each of the equations. So let's look. Let's start with this line right here. That's going to be my line 1. If I look at this, I can see my y-intercept right here is at 1. Okay, so I know that b equals 1. And then to find the slope, I just need to find another point, let's say right here. And I can see I'm going down 1, right 1. So that means I have a slope of -1. All right, so equation 1, we have a slope of -1 and a y-intercept of +1. So remember, we have slope-intercept form. So this would be y equals -1x plus 1. So that's one of my equations. Now for the other equation, we need to do the same thing. So that's going to be this line right here. I can see my y-intercept is at -4. To find my slope, I find another point on my line, and I can either do the slope formula or I can just count my rate of change. This is going up and right, so it's going up 2, right 3. So that'll be +2/3. Remember, if your line is going uphill, you should have a positive slope. If it's going downhill, it should have a negative slope. So plugging this into slope-intercept form, I get y equals 2/3 x minus 4. Okay, so graphs are pretty quick. Just look at it, identify slope and y-intercept for each of your lines. All right, and then that's it. We wrote our system. Remember, a system is just having more than one equation. Okay, now for tables. Now we're going to do a little more work here. So for the tables, the first thing you want to do is find your slope. And then we're going to use either slope-intercept form or point-slope form to find the y-intercept. I like using point-slope form, so that's what I'm going to use in this example. If you like slope-intercept, feel free to use that. Remember, you got to plug in for your x and your y, and then your m, and then solve for b. So working through this, let's say that this is my equation 1. First, finding the slope, I'm going to pick 2 points to use. Here's x1, x2, y1, y2. So to find my slope using the slope formula, I'm going to do -10 minus 22 over 2 minus -6. And remember, you can type that straight in your calculator. And that gives me -4 for my slope. Now I'm going to use point slope. So I'm going to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So plugging in my x1 and y1, y minus 22 equals -4 times x minus -6. Remember, that's going to become a plus. So first thing you do is you distribute your -4. So y minus 22 equals -4x minus 24. Then I add 22 to each side, and I get y equals -4x minus 2. So there's one equation. So now I'm going to do the second one. I'm kind of out of room here. So here's x1, x2, y1, y2. So m equals 2 minus -4, -1 minus -4. Typing that in my calculator, 2 minus -4 over -1 minus -4 gives me 2. So using point slope, I've got y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So y minus -4 equals 2 times x minus -4. Change both those to positive. And then I'm going to distribute. So I have y plus 4 equals 2x plus 8. subtract 4 from each side, and I get y equals 2x plus 4. Okay, and so I have both of my equations there. Remember, you can check these too. So like to check the ones for the tables, I can type both of these equations for my y equals, and then go to my table on my calculator by pressing second graph and seeing if my numbers match what I had in the tables. For the graphs, you just type in both the equations, press graph, and see if it matches what you have here. All right, now we're going to talk word problems, and I know we dread those, but they're not that bad. The first one says, Johnny has a bag that contains 17 coins. All of the coins are either quarters or dimes. The total value of the coins is $3.65. What system of equations can be used? So we have a total of 17 coins. We have a total value of $3.65. We have quarters, which we know equal 25 cents. And we have dimes, which we know equal 10 cents. Okay? We don't know how many quarters. And then we don't know how many dimes. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this information is I'm going to write two equations. I've got two variables. I need two equations that uses all of this information. So one equation is going to be based on my dollar amount, okay? So I need this equation to equal my total of $3.65. Now I know I've got to add how much my quarters are plus how much my dimes are, okay, to make that $3.65. So what would happen is I would multiply how many quarters I have by that 25 cents and how many dimes I have by that 10 cents. And then that would give me $3.65, okay? So that's one equation. That's the equation based off of the worth, okay? Now I need an equation based off of how many I have, all right? So it's not taking into factor how much they're worth, it's just how many coins there are, okay? So for the coins, I'm going to take my quarters and my dimes and add them together. So if I have 5 dimes and 5 quarters, I add those together, and that gives me my total number of coins, which we said was 17. And so that gives me my two equations, okay? So remember, if you're talking about costs or coins, you want to have an equation that uses how much it's worth, and then also have an equation just talking about how many you have. Also helpful in word problems is identifying your variables, all right? Write it down, that way you know what your X and your Y are representing. You don't always have to use an X and a Y. You could use whatever. I could have used a Q and a D to stand for quarters and dimes. The key is write it down so you know what it was meant for. All right, next one. Catherine and Talon were given $200 each for Christmas. Both girls use this money to open their own bank accounts. Trying to save up for a new phone, Catherine plans to deposit $5 each week into her account. Talon, however, decides to spend $10 each week for snacks. What system of equations can be used to represent this? All right, so we know that they have a starting amount. So the starting amount for both girls was $200. All right. Catherine is depositing. Okay, she's depositing $5 each week. Talon is spending $10 each week. Okay, so one thing I don't know is I don't know how many weeks we're doing this. All right, so we're going to say that X is our number of weeks. And then we don't know how much money they're going to have left after that number of weeks. So we're going to say Y is the money left for each of the girls. All right, so in this situation, having two separate people, we're going to base our equations off of each person. So we're going to write an equation for Catherine. So for Catherine, the money she has left is going to be equal to how much she started with plus her $5 every week. So we do 5x because it's $5 every week. X is our weeks. So we could write 200 plus 5x, or you could write 5x plus 200. Either way, it's the same thing. Okay, but that's one equation. For Taylin, to find her equation, to find how much money she has left, she's starting with 200, and then she's taking away $10 every week. So we could write 200 minus 10x, or if you put this in slope-intercept form, negative 10x plus 200. All right, and once again, means the same thing as long as the signs are where they're supposed to be. All right, and then you have the two equations for Catherine and Taylin. So these could technically be used to figure out when they, how much money they have in future number of weeks, things like that. All right, and then that's it.